Now ngifuna ukuveza la izinto a misconception esicabangayo ukuthi izona kanti asizona. Le language esisebenzisa kakhulu ekhaya mawuthi uyayibheka kahle hayi ayihambi kanjalo. It's not like that. Thina sikhuluma ile sithi iscience yasemgaqweni. Njengoba umuntu yazi iweight, mesikhuluma ngeweight, it's a force, and i-force ikalwa in newtons. Kodwa ubona umuntu ema eskaleni ethi hayi iweight yami ngiweya 20 kg. Awuzwe man, 20 kg. Cha, that's a mess. It's not a weight. Kodwa sisajwayela hayi uweya ngaki, weigh less, sokwehla 10 kg. Imess leyo. So into esijwayele ukuzisho. Right. Nansi ke into engifuna ukuyi-addressa kakhulu, especially kuma acids and base. Lamagama lawa. We have a strong acid as against a weak acid. Sibe ne concentrated acid as against a dilute acid. A strong acid as against a weak acid. Even a concentrated acid as against a dilute acid. In most cases, ekhaya, la uhlala khona, abantu bathatha into concentrated but is strong, bese into dilute, concentrated, let me say acid and dilute acid, but into diluted but weak. But hi man, hey man, uphuza leli coffee is strong, leli coffee. Awulifaka amanzi ulenze libe weak. Yabona ngale nkathi uyitshela ukuthi i-coffee is strong or i-oros is strong. Ayikho strong, it's concentrated. Mawuyifaka amanzi awuzisingisi ke manje. Yabona isingisi esingenaphi? Mawuyifaka amanzi uyayidilute. Kodwa mase uyidilutile bese uthi weak. Yini ungaselifaki lelo gama ke le dilute. Diluted. Ngamanye amazwi i-acid ingaba concentrated. Mawuyifaka amanzi ibe dilute. Siyaza ukuthi inhloboni enjani strong enjani weak. Ingaba concentrated. Whether it's a strong acid or a weak acid, ingaba concentrated. Kusho ukuthi into concentrated angazi ngayishaya kanjani ngesizulu, kodwa into eminyene iningi endaweni ethize, iningi concentrated. That's why we talk of concentration as number of moles in a given volume. Kuleli class elincane kanje, kuleli class mangafaka abantu abawu-1000, yabona kwi-space esingaka ngifaka abantu abawu-1000, hey bakwethu, you will be concentrated, you are concentrated, niminyene. So now into concentrated usho ukuthi iningi yona kuleso space. Mufuna uyibona kahle concentration, gibela istimela esidlula kamnyando. Ngike ngasigibela bakwethu, sasi concentrated, ngangimpintshekile, ngize ngantanta emoyeni, ubone ukuthi hawa kugcwele la. So now it's concentrated. So we can have a strong acid but being concentrated. The very same strong acid, you dilute it, besiba dilute, but it still remains a strong acid. We can have a weak acid being concentrated. Yeah. I-weak injalo, kodwa ubu acid bayo buningi kuleyo container. ngale nkathi uyifaka amanzi, weak acid, concentrated. You add water, weak acid, dilute. So i-dilution ne-concentrated ayikhulumi nge-strength se-acid. Thina ke yonke into thina siyaquba nje. Awufake leyo oros, awuyifake amanzi ibe weak. Na. Moyifaka amanzi ubu-oros busakhona, i-oros isakhona. Kodwa injani? I-dilute. Now what about a strong acid? An example of a strong acid. What is a strong acid? A strong acid. Yazi abantu angeke nizwe kahle kodwa ngicela uyizwe kahle ke manje. I strong acid. Now asibuyele lapha uArenas wayethi let's talk of Florey-Bronsted. But ile substance ekwazi ukudonate ngo-H+. Now i strong acid ubona kanjani ubu-acid bayo iyakwazi ukunikela ngo-H+. Now i strong sibona kanjani inikela ngo-H+ kalula. Kusho nje kwi-environment nje enamanzi mufake leyo strong acid iyaphana nje ngo-H+ kalula. That's a strong acid. Iyakwazi uku-affecta i-environment yayo ibe igcwale nje abo-H+. Iyenze i-environment yabo ibe na ubu-acid nje ugcwale nje H+. La ifika khona nje hayi ibhoza abantu bangasho njalo ibhoza ifika nje iphana ngo-H+. Ikhipha u-H+ kalula. That's a strong acid. Iyenza ukuthi i-environment i-affecteke ibe acidic. An example yalokho HCl, strong acid. Ufake emanzini ake ngiyibhale. In water it dissociates. It forms H+, aqueous, and Cl- aqueous. Lo aqueous, which means in water, mengene nje emanzini HCl hlakazeka kalula. Yeah, affect manje. Yeah, that's a strong acid. Ibhoza, i-acid leyo sithi amabhoza. Ngiyabona uma seyidonatile ngo-H+, isala yona u-Cl-. In fact, ithanda ukuhlala as Cl- emanzini. It prefers mengene nje emanzini. That's a strong acid. So ke lalela ke ngikuxoxela indaba ungatsheli umuntu kule ndaba engikuxoxela yona. Yabona mufuna ukuthi mufuna indawo, mufuna ukuthi indaba ihambe kalula. Awusebenzisela amagama ukuthi mnganami ungatsheli umuntu. Uzoyibonela nawe. Iyahamba indaba. Ungatsheli umuntu ke la. Nansi indaba. Uma strong acid, ithi ngibhale in full. Strong acid will always give a weak conjugate base. Why is it it's a weak base? Why iba weak? Which means I accept to H+ kalula. Weak. Tando H+. Or Cl-, they can accept H+, but with difficulty. That's a weak base. Strong acid donates. Me say donate as umuntu othanda ukuphana. Noma ekunika imali uyakhohlwa nanokuthi wakunika imali. Umuntu othanda ukuphana ke lo. Uyakhohlwa. Hayibo now 500 rand imuphi? Hayi la ngakunikeza. Okay, bese ngikhohliwe. Hayi umuntu ophanayo ke lo. Siyeza umuntu oncishanayo i-weak le. Siyeza kuyena. Strong acid will always form a weak conjugate base. Strong acid, it almost dissociates completely in water. Ihlakazeka yonke isale ku-Cl-. Abelungu bathanda ukuyisebenzisa bathi it's almost completely. Which means you can find small traces of HCl kuhlangene. Kodwa esikhathini esiningi dissociates completely. So a strong acid, as it dissociates completely, it makes amanzi, its solution yamanzi, ibe ionized, ibe no positive, no negative. So uma solution emanzini is a positive and negative, we call it an electrolyte. Hey, electrolyte, which means a strong acid will always give us a strong electrolyte. What is an electrolyte? It is that solution that can conduct electricity. That's an electrolyte. Yeah. Mawuvula ibhetri yemoto phakathi uthi uyabheka khona le sulfuric acid. Hayibo, that it acts as an electrolyte. Iconduct gas, ihambisa ugesi lapha noma start imoto, ivuma imoto. Phela khona ezinye ke iyakutshela ukuthi ayivumi wena ubona uyizwa. Ithi hayi. Usaba sathe ithi hayi, uyizwa ithi hayi. Ayivumi. When ufuna ukuyihambisa ngenkani. Strong acid will give us strong electrolyte, which means strong acid, it ionizes almost completely in water. Ihlakazeka kalula. That's a strong acid. So a strong acid, HCl, can still be concentrated. When you add water, you dilute it, but it still remains a strong acid. What about a weak acid? How? Obviously weak is opposite, is strong. What is a weak acid? A weak acid is an opposite of a strong acid. Weak acid. Maybe a weak acid. Now, H2CO3. It's an example of a weak acid. Carbonic acid. Carbonic acid, that's a weak acid. Enjani now? In water, all right, it forms H plus, aqueous, and HCO3 minus, aqueous. Carbonic acid may donate with H plus. It donate kanzima, akulula. Ungathi a weak acid, it cannot donate with H+. If it cannot donate, then it does not qualify to be called an acid. But acid is a proton donor. So now it donates with H+, but with difficulty. It's a magic word. Magic. 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 Nani? Magic. Aqueous. Aqueous. So now, a weak acid. Iya donate yebo. Kodwa donate kanzima kulula ihlukane no H+. Oh, okay. Ngamanye amazwi, a weak acid will always give us a strong conjugate base. That's a weak acid. It does not ionize completely in water. Itetela abo hydrogen abanye yona bese ingeke. Ingabe sabatetela. Ayiteteli kalula. Uma kuyi a weak acid. Nale mase itetelile le esele uma kungenzeka ihlangana no H+ iyathatha. Strong conjugate acid. A weak base a weak acid will give us a strong conjugate base. Ngoba ayithandi ukuhlukana nalento. Kunjengomuntu wemali. Lo thanda imali. Hey, wakuboleka nje. Kodwa hayi uzoyiletha ngomhla ka-30 ngomhla ka-28 yakufonela thawu manje konje usayikhumbula leyo mpahla. Hayi yazi bese ngikhohliwe vele kupheleni kwenyanga sohlangana. So yabona hayi lo muntu lo bengathanda ukuhlukana nemali. So now kodwa ungathi le ayithanda ukuhlukana nemali. Ayithanda ukuhlukana no H+. It donates with H+, but with difficulty. That's a weak acid. A weak acid will always give us a strong conjugate base. That's a weak acid. Will give us a strong conjugate base. A strong acid will give us a weak conjugate base. So ungakhohlwa ke. Any example your strong ne weak is strong le HNO3. It's a strong acid. Any example your weak acid ile siphuza ekhaya yikho lokho ingasihluphi kakhulu H3. Carbonic acid, that's a weak acid. So we have the strength. Please don't forget, these are, we misuse amagama lawa or strong, no concentrated. We can have a strong acid being concentrated, also a strong acid being diluted. May concentrated, as it does not mean njengoba sithi concentrated isuka strong. Isuka is strong uma ikwazi ukudonate ngo-H plus kalula. Isuka weak uma ikwazi ukudonate with H plus kanzima, with difficulty. It's a weak acid. Kodwa le, whether it's weak or strong, it can be concentrated. Concentrated kusho ukuthi iningi yona ukudlula amanzi. Moyifaka emanzi nje iningi yona ukudlula amanzi. Amanzi being a solvent, yona it's a solute. Kodwa uma dilute amanzi adlula yona njengoba isolvent isincibilikisi leso. Isolvent idlula isolute, isolute okuyi acid. So amanzi lapha maningi, amanzi lapha ayitamizela nje. Lana hayi mancane kakhulu iyona ekhona. So we talk of concentrated.